It's not just when played, it's also when he defends.
Such early stages of this game that I could just be completely wrong right now.
You can have multiple gods come out of nowhere and threaten a very strong board.
You know, leaders like you can just give them out willy-nilly. You don't have to wait for a card.
If all goes according to plan, you're leaving this Fury in your base for the entire game. Pretty sure he actually beats every deck, and maybe you have a transitional sideboard go from the control deck to the order side.
You play the shell game as Teemo. You put it in your hand, and you move it around, and you shuffle your cards.
Love it. All right. We're doing it again. It's still...
Okay.
Pastry's not here in the meme, the bit still. It still happens. Yeah. It's a cold open. If you don't like a cold open, then I don't know. You clicked the wrong podcast, I guess.
Gotta go open a cold one, and that'll get you through Blevins for this episode.
That'll get you through the winning point, episode 3. I am Blevins, joined by Casanova and Charmer. What is up, friends? How you doing?
I'm great. I've been playing a lot of Riftbound. Been hanging out. I mean, you know, Mo's in our comment section all the time, but I've also been playing a good amount of Riftbound with just playing a bunch of different decks. Definitely feeling good about the game. I feel like we're still missing so much, but I've got some like early decks that I'm excited about. I feel like are quite good.
Love it.
I've been enjoying horrible heat waves followed by horrible thunderstorms. And I've spent most of my time on a rocking chair on my front porch waiting to receive an invitation in the mail to play games with Casanova and Mo because nobody wants to play with me. How dare you? I would love to be jamming Riftbound games.
All right, we'll play after the podcast. There we go.
There it is. And I'll bird the games because I hate TTS so much. Also, I'm on a Steam Deck in France right now, so I can't do that. Anyways, we've got a ton of cards to talk about this week. If you tuned in last week, you saw us talk about a bunch of cards. We're going to talk about all the new cards, at least in some amount, that we saw this entire week. Plus, we've got our mailbag section. Again, thank you to everyone who has been watching the show on YouTube, listening on Spotify. We've got a nice number of comments, questions, and other things that maybe Mo sent in that we'll talk about here on the show. But first and foremost, we've got a new Ahri Inquisitive. Oh, yeah. Let's talk about her.
Yeah, I mean, you know, every week we've got a new best card in Riftbound that gets revealed, and this was the one of this week was Ahri Inquisitive. Now it's hard to say, you know, exactly which of these cards, if any of them, are actually the best card ever. This is effectively 6 value in Ahri on a board defending because of the fact that it reads, when I defend, give an enemy unit here -2 might this turn to a minimum of 1. She's a champion unit. 3 energy, 1 power, mind, 1 blue power, and she's 3 might. So you give that -2 on the attack or the defend, but especially on defend when you're playing Ahri, you give that -2. So essentially, Ahri's at 5 might. And then there's the other -1 from the Ahri Legend ability. So basically, this is like 6 might as a 3-drop. And you have to consider that this starts in your champion zone as Ahri. And so if you go second as Ahri, the first turn of the game, every single game, can be play blue Ahri. And if your opponent does not have an answer, she's going to hold for a couple of turns once she gets on board. So it's very, very powerful for the Ahri deck to be able to play around.
I'm so excited for this card. As somebody who plans on playing a ton of Ahri, I'm also so not excited for this card for any time I have to play against it. It is a ton of value. As you pointed out, coming from the champion zone, it is going to be incredibly consistent. I do wonder this will be a meta-defining card, not just because of its power level, but also because a lot of times metas develop where you're either playing something or you have to have an answer for it, right? Yep. And so when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, okay, if I'm not playing Ahri and I don't have an answer, then what is my recourse? And then it might be something that's, you know, a 3-cost removal or something where you're just trying to pick this off early so that you don't have to deal with it for multiple turns. And so I can definitely see situations where, you know, even if you're not playing Ahri, you're going to be forced to have a game plan for this. And that's a meta-defining card in my mind.
Yeah, it really sets the bar of where you need to be, right? Because it's like you said, it starts in the champion zone. It's there if the Ahri player is going second, it's their turn. It's a possibility turn 1 every single game. assuming that you get at least one blue rune. I'm wondering if the single blue power is enough to like keep this in check, because it does effectively take away the long-term benefit of going second, of having that extra rune channeled on that first turn. You're essentially saying, okay, I don't need that on future turns. I'm going back down to parity, having already gone second, to play the Ahri. I wonder if that's going to be enough to keep it in check, or if this is just is this just OP?
I feel like I'd play this as like a 5 energy 0 power unit as well, right? So like I think like losing the 1 power early, I think is probably pretty okay. Okay, yeah, you have to bring in these answers for Ahri in some sense. If the deck is at all meta relevant, if Ahri is a deck you expect to see at a tournament, you need to be able to answer blue Ahri. Now, the problem is Ahri's colors are green and blue, and they have access to things like Defy, which will counterspell the 4 cost, 3 power removal, 3 might removal spell that you're trying to play.
Yeah.
And they have the ability to buff at reactions, plenty of ability. They have Zhonya's Hourglass, which I've been thoroughly impressed with that card. That was a card that maybe we overlooked a little bit, where this is just, it's a hidden card that when a unit is destroyed, you can instead flip the Zhonya's Hourglass and they'll get sent back to your base exhausted instead of being destroyed. And the Hourglass gets destroyed. So you can just kind of be like, okay, well, you might be able to capture on this turn, but I'm still going to have Ahri on the bench ready to swing in on the next turn. So many ways to protect it makes this effect so much stronger. The ways that I've seen to counteract it quite well are multiple spells being able to be fired at Ahri through something like a Kaisa deck that likes to run a lot of removal that can hit this, or really big things like Volibear decks, and we'll stay tuned, I guess, for more on that later with our mailbag.
We're talking about the scenario where this is entering play as early as possible every game, but the reality is it's in the champion zone, but that doesn't mean you have to play it, right? So there's also going to be situations where, hey, if you deem that losing that blue power early is not going to be beneficial, well, then you can just have it hang out. It's still an incredible amount of value. Cass said it's 3 for essentially 6, and so that's good at any stage of the game realistically. So if you don't need it, or you have a hand that's just not going to work with that, or maybe you have other stuff that you want to develop depending on what your draw is, you don't have to go down that path, but having the option every time is incredible.
I'm going to be keeping an eye out for, and also for reference, if you're watching this in the future, we are at the end of June here, so we still have a lot of cards to be revealed. So you may be listening to us being like, well, of course, insert X card just deals with that very cleanly. Has not been revealed to us at this point. If we see if you're coming from Magic, a lightning bolt type effect that's like 1 resource, deal 3 damage to something and doesn't cost a power, we're going to be talking about a new rating system that we're going to be using on the show for cards. Unplayable, situational, or staple. Casanova, where are you putting blue Ahri?
I mean, it's a staple, especially in Ahri, but also just like as a final point for me, you look at any deck that can run Mind, and Ahri just baseline has some very high value. It's looking at kind of basically a 5 might for 3 and a power, which I think in most Mind decks can find a slot. Also, a lot of people ask about like, oh, is there like a Legends rule for champion? No, you can have 3 of these on the board at the same time. They're very, very good when you get them in multiples.
Charmer, you rating?
Staple it to your deck. If you're playing blue, it's incredibly economical. Yes, in Ahri, obviously 3 for 6, but again, 3 for 5 is also incredibly good, but also the minus might, I think, is going to end up being relevant as we get more cards revealed as well, because when we get to the showdown stages, for example, if something has minus might, it might take them out of being mighty, for example, might turn off effects for your opponent. And so I think there's a lot of ways that this is going to impact things beyond just the raw numbers game. I find it hard to believe that decks that can play this are not going to want to play this.
Definitely think I agree here. I am going to choose a different rating, though. I'm going to choose unplayable, in that I'm not going to want to play the game anymore when I'm seeing Ahri every single game. JK, it's a staple. Let's move on to a card that I know you, Charmer, are very excited about. We talked about it a little bit in the pre-show. It is the new blue Teemo Strategist. Tell us about him.
So this Teemo is a 2 energy, 1 mind power, 2 might version of Teemo. has hidden, like you would expect from my favorite little Yordle. Says, when I defend or I'm played from hidden, reveal the top 5 cards of your main deck, deal 1 to an enemy unit here for each card with hidden, then recycle them. This is, I think, kind of perfect for a heavy, kind of almost all-in hidden deck for Teemo. I say almost all-in because I can't imagine a situation where you're going to want every card in your deck to be hidden. I think that the sweet spot for something like this is going to be if you can average between 2 and 3, you're still getting good value because it's not just when played, it's also when he defends. I feel like Mind is going to be a very defenders oriented, color for Blue's color pie, color association, whatever you want to call it. I think that's going to be its home, right? So even in non-Teemo decks where if you have a decent amount of hidden, I think that you could still get some value, but I really do think that this is just going to be an all-star in Teemo for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but I need to bundle the cards together as well here, because we also had Nocturne revealed, which is a 4 energy, 1 chaos power champion that has
purple.
gang, and it says when you look at cards from the top of your deck and you don't draw them and see me, you may play me for 1 power, and he has 4 might as well. And I think for me, when I first looked at the Teemo card, because it was revealed, the same time as Nocturne, I was like, well, that is a really powerful combo to do when you're getting to kind of, is the same idea as Immortal Phoenix when we talked about that last week, where it's like when you're getting all this free value from, you look at your deck, now I've got, okay, my Teemo does 2 damage and I put a Nocturne on board. That's an incredibly powerful thing that you were able to do with the Teemo. And so that's why I see this Teemo as being like, this card is in Teemo because it is in Mind Chaos, and maybe any future Mind Chaos decks would also potentially like this combination of cards.
When I saw the Teemo, I literally just said to myself, thanks, I hate it, because I'm really going to I'm going to be playing Angie. I'm going to want to be attacking, and I'm going, I'm just, especially at the beginning of the game when I don't, have the mind read on every single possible hidden and what's optimal versus is my opponent trying to game me. I'm not anywhere near that. I'm not going to be anywhere near that for quite some time. So I'm just going to go head down, Angie, attack the battlefield, and figure it out later. And this Teemo is just going to demolish me so often. Notably, unlike the Ahri cards and other might affecting cards that reduce might, Teemo does not say to a minimum of 1 might. It just deals damage. So your units can just be destroyed by Teemo. Maybe you don't put it in the champion zone. I'm not sure what's optimal.
You play the shell game as Teemo. You put it in your hand and you move it around and you shuffle your cards.
But you can't play from a champion zone.
No, I know.
It's not even the champion zone.
Teemo's ability.
Guerrilla warfare.
Teemo's ability puts it in your hand.
Oh my god.
It puts it in your hand.
Yeah, this is.
And then you shuffle your hand around.
Okay, never mind.
I have one more big thing I want to talk about on this. This is a 40 card game in your deck. This is look at top 5 cards and then recycle them, right? And probably when you play this Teemo from hidden, you'll probably get 2 activations out of it, right? You'll get the once when you reveal it from hidden, and then probably a second time when it defends, maybe later. Even if not, it's still 5, right? That's what is that? 1/8 of your deck. From there, I've been looking at a promising future Teemo Nocturne deck. There's not enough cards to support this yet. This is an early cook. But Promising Future is a 5 energy, 1 blue power. It is a spell. It says each player looks at the top 5 cards of their main deck, chooses 1, then recycles the rest. Starting with the next player, each player plays those cards, ignoring energy costs. They must still play power costs. Now, if there's some really big bombs that you want to play in blue and purple, there's not a ton of options yet. That's something you can do. Possession is a cool idea. That's 8 energy, 3 power, steal a unit, but that unit has to be on a battlefield. So you can't, if you play this into Volibear, plays a big thing, you can't steal it. But the big thing is you get Nocturnes out more with that, right? Because you're looking at so many cards. You're cycling through. If you're playing the 3 blue Teemos, you're playing the Promising Futures, you're playing cards that have vision, because that lets you find Nocturne as well, you are very quickly deciding the order that your deck is in. And from there, you can then leverage the top 5 cards and recycle thing, and you can leverage your draws. And there are plenty of more ways that are coming out as well in blue that let you draw cards. We'll talk about one a little bit later, but there's also just a few ways already to draw cards. You're going to be able to decide what cards you need.
It says when I defend or I'm played from hidden. Now, hidden, you can react. You can play it as a reaction later for 0. Do you get to just double dip the effect like the first time that you reveal it? Like you reveal it as a react, like they attack, you reveal it during that when the showdown's created, you get the effect, and then also it's defending, you get the effect again?
No. So the way that it works is when the attacks come in, you get the when I attack and when I defend triggers go on the stack first. Those will resolve, and then you can start playing things. I think hidden would come after the when I attack and when I defend triggers are on the stack, and then you can react with the hidden at that point.
Oh, but I see.
Then
that's the only
when
time.
I defend trigger.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Defenders are assigned the moment that showdown is created.
Okay.
And hidden stuff can't be played until a showdown is already in progress. So you've kind of skipped the phase where he'd be considered a defender.
Yeah. And since it is react speed, yes, you can play it during that phase, but it is after the when I defend and when I attack triggers have been created.
This is a trigger that happens at a specific time. And even though Teemo would still be considered a defender, you don't then trigger that when I'm defended or when I defend trigger. That happens at the specific time at the beginning of the showdown.
That's just it. If it helps you with your thought process, don't think of him as a defender. Think of him as a combat participant. But he was not a defender because he was not there at the start. So he participates, but he's
is
not
that
defending.
true, though?
He just shows up for fun.
No, he is defending, Charmer, because if he was granted shield, you would count as a defender. So, but the when I defend and when I attack triggers are an event
happen
that
at a
happens
specific
at the very start. It is created, and you cannot get them later within the combat.
Okay, we're having this conversation so that you later don't have to argue with people at your LGS. You can just show them this
wrong,
clip.
Then argue with us in the comments. You know, like if I'm wrong, look, I've played a good amount and I've read through the rule book, but we're still in such early stages of this game that I could just be completely wrong right now. So you tell me in the comments. I think I'm right.
I cannot believe a scenario where
this triggers
they're going to let you look through 1/4 of your deck and deal potentially up to 10 damage for something that either costs 2 or no,
it doesn't work.
Well, we've kind of, I guess I haven't really talked about Nocturne. I do have thoughts on actually. Let's wrap up Teemo here, and then also have thoughts on Nocturne. Yeah, we'll continue on Nocturne. Teemo, unplayable, situational, or staple. Charmer, I'll start with you.
The troll in me, I've realized that I'm going to have to balance my assessments for, do I want to troll Blevins or do I want to help the viewers? So I'll go with helping the viewers. I sadly think he's simply situational. I think he's very strong in Teemo. I think he's very strong if you have a high number of hidden cards. I do not, however, feel confident enough to just say staple, because if you do not have a critical mass of hidden cards to get value from his trigger, you're not going to want to run him in every mined deck. So for me, situational, that probably becomes a staple if you're playing the champion Teemo.
I think that's pretty fair. I think for me, my evaluation of staple is like in the deck that wants to play this, is it always in the deck? And I think that a deck that is playing around hidden, a deck that is playing around maybe Nocturne or reveal effects like reveal off the top, like that deck is always playing Teemo. It's a staple in that case. Right now, the only deck that can do that, because the only Mind and Chaos deck, is Teemo. In Teemo, this is a staple, so I'm going to say staple. I don't think it's like, you would only bring this in certain matchups or anything like that. I think it's a staple for the decks it wants to be in. Given that criteria, I would agree staple. Every time we get a hidden card in a future set for the rest of eternity until Teemo rotates out, like it's going to be, this just makes Teemo better. Moving on to Nocturne, we've already talked about him. I'm really very excited about Nocturne. One, because we have not seen a lot of chaos cards up until this point that were really exciting. Like I saw someone was talking about
like running Jinx, but not even using the Chaos cards, just like mono Angie Jinx. Up until this week, I've really kind of been like, okay, well, I'm not even going to really consider the Chaos cards because we have not seen a lot of the core cards. Nocturne does the thing that I've talked about in previous episodes of it can create these situations where your opponent feels like they are safe given your board state. And, oh, by the way, I play a card, I play an action or reaction or whatever that reveals cards on your turn. And all of a sudden I've got 4, 8, 12, you know, you can have multiple Nocturnes come out of nowhere and threaten a very strong board and at a very low cost of just one generic power. Cass, is this what you're seeing in your testing?
Yeah, well, so I actually haven't played the deck yet because I don't think there's enough support. You could probably play just like a normal Teemo, like less unhinged version with Nocturne. It'd be good. I haven't played it yet. Effect is just going to be good anytime you can kind of cheat out a lot of resources like this. I think it's strong. We saw Teemo. You already want to be looking at the top 5 cards of your deck. They're not all going to be hidden. You can't just put a million hidden cards in your deck. So the cards that aren't hidden, what if they're Nocturnes? Well, now I've also established a board. So right now we only see it in mind. So it has to be Teemo that plays Nocturne. But I'm hoping that we see more opportunities for people to look at top cards of the deck or like look at top 5 cards or something. And Nocturne sees more play. But for me, I'm like, this card is definitely going to be crazy and relevant. I don't see a world where this card is bad.
I think this card is probably a staple for decks that want to play it. Using Cass's modification for what staple means from the last time. This card actually, in my opinion, has the potential to be very dangerous because if my history with card games has taught me anything, it's that if you can do something for free that you would normally have to pay for, it's usually very, very good. And this is letting you do something for free while also the only build requirement is likely doing something you would want to do or would benefit from anyway, which is looking at cards in your deck or searching or whatever. So this card feels incredible. And I have a hard time imagining decks that want to play this ever excluding it for any reason whatsoever. I'm actually kind of waiting. I hope that we get like a spell that's just called Darkness and it's literally just like look at the top 10 cards of your deck.
Yeah.
Doesn't do anything else. You just look and then
recycle, up. Right? So you're kind of like you're setting up your deck. I will say the one terrible downside for Nocturne is that if you draw him, he's
drawing him, yeah.
Yeah, he's pretty bad if you draw him. I mean, it's not like game ending, right? You have 4 energy, 1 power for 4. He's really bad and you would not put it in your deck. But ganking is a good keyword and it's not like he's completely unplayable as a card if it ends up in your hand.
Specifically because Nocturne is likely to be played in Teemo, Teemo's ability allows you to play hidden cards for energy instead of the actual power. So when you get to the point where you're potentially deploying Nocturne, you're more likely to have that power to spend because you've been saving it if you've been paying energy to deploy your hidden cards, right? So Teemo also has this kind of really cool built-in thing to work with Nocturne and offset arguably the worst part about paying his cost, which is, you have to recycle the rune. But in this case, you don't even have to worry about that if Teemo's been saving you rune space.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts on Nocturne?
No,
He's spooky.
He is spooky. I'm going to actually give him situational. I do think that you can build around him, and obviously, like in that build around deck, you're going to want Nocturne. It's going to be a key part, but you do need to put in a lot of deck building cost to support him because you want I think you're going to want ways to reveal him, but also like to mitigate the drawing him effect, because you can't just rely on not drawing him. It's just not going to be good, because like even if you see him in your opening hand, he gets recycled if you mulligan him, right? Like you're not going to reliably see him.
Here's the beauty of him, right? Depending on who you're playing him with, if you're playing him with Jinx and you draw him, you can just use him as discard fodder, right? There's a lot of discard effects. And there's also discard effects just within Chaos. There's, I forget the name of the actual...
It's like...
the merchant, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a 2 energy to my... When I move, discard 1, then draw 1. So you can just kind of get rid of him and get something else.
Or if you're trying to get more value, like, yes, he's got the ganking, but if you're playing a deck that's also running, say, Misfortune, like, 4 for 4 is not great, but if you're also just using him to play to an open battlefield, it's not terrible. But also if you're getting him off of a trigger, and you can play him essentially for free to an open battlefield. That seems also kind of insane. So I do think there will be support to potentially offset his downside if you draw him.
Right. What's your ranking, Blev?
I'm sticking with situational. I think he's one of the more exciting cards, just like a unique effect, but I'm not. Again, we don't know all the cards in the set yet, so I'm waiting to see more support and see where he actually slots in, because it is quite a downside to have him in your hand at almost any time.
I think he creates an archetype, so when he's the build around, he's a staple. Any other time, I actually think he's unplayable. I think if you're not building around playing Nocturne, I don't think that you should probably put it in your deck.
Let's move on. We got a bunch of new blue champions. We got Victor Innovator. Victor Innovator is a 4 resource, 1 blue power, 3 might champion unit that says when you play a card on your opponent's turn, play a 1 might recruit unit token to your base. Yeah, control Victor in the house. I mean, this plays obviously in the Victor Legend. All of these actions, reactions, card draw, all this stuff that you can play on your opponent's turn is just also going to be developing your board. I'm not looking forward to playing against.
Yep. I mean, it's for like hidden as well. Quite good.
Oh God.
I think.
Yeah.
Didn't even think about that.
I think this is probably the better Victor for the Victor Legend as well, because you want to make a lot of weenies. The Order Victor is also at 4 energy, 1 power, and the other Victor is 4 might, but when another non-recruit unit you control dies, play a 1 power recruit unit token to your base. So it's the same effect, just at a different timing, right? This is when you play a card versus when a unit you control dies. And I think playing a card on opponent's turn is like an easier condition to satisfy repeatedly and create a lot of extra recruits to then have the payoff later. Depends how you build your Victor deck, of course, which one you're going to want actually very heavily. You could go for a really unit heavy order Victor deck and play around the Order Victor, or you can go a bit more spell heavy, more control heavy, like you're talking about Blevins, and play this one. But as far as generating a critical mass of recruits, I think this one is significantly better at doing so. So my initial look, I haven't tested a lot of Victor at all, but my initial look at this is I'm more compelled by this Victor, the new one, the Mind Victor with the making recruits when I play a card on my opponent's turn, than I am when I just get a recruit when one of my units dies.
I really like this. I would say I'm definitely more drawn to this version of Victor simply because it is filling a gap that works incredible with Victor, but also I think just works across Mind as a whole. Earlier in this episode, I said I feel like part of the identity of Mind is going to be helping to control spaces. And so because this is a Victor that also works with spells, but also with hidden as well, essentially anytime that you have a spot, someone's attacking into you, and now you're maybe playing something defensively on their turn, you're also getting free power. I think that is very compelling to me, and it makes me want to not just play this in Victor, but potentially in other decks as well. I could absolutely see this being played in a Teemo deck, for example, because I don't think that Teemo is going to have a lot of very large units. I think that you're not going to go tall, but if you've got a bunch of these little things, but you're also playing hidden and you're playing your actions and so forth, you're going to just naturally generate power to help you hold down a spot more and more over time if you have this Victor on the board. So I really like this, and I think that it's more flexible than the other one.
This is definitely like the control Victor versus the mid-rangey unit-based Victor. But this is the first time 2 champions for the legend. These 2 champions don't really synergize necessarily with each other. Every other one is like, oh, I want to play both Ahris. I want to play both Teemos. I want to play both Dariuses or both Yasuos or whatever. This is like, no, I'm going to play a base deck that leans towards one Victor versus the other. And maybe you have a transitional sideboard where you just completely change your strategy to go from the control deck to, but now I'm, siding into the order side of my Victor deck, and I'm doing more of a unit-based token strategy versus I'm playing a bunch of reactive spells, or vice versa. It doesn't feel very much like in the Victor deck you would want to have both of them in your deck at the same time necessarily. This also feels very much like a backline champion, where a lot of the champions we've seen are like, oh, this is impacting combat in some way. I want to attack with this champion or hold with this champion or use this champion to help my other units. This is like, no, if all goes according to plan, you're leaving this victor in your base for the entire game and hoping your opponent has nothing to deal with it.
Yeah, there's not a ton of backline ones. I think I mostly disagree with that. Most champions want to play like both of their, or most legends want to play both their champions. I think there's like an equal or less example of legends that want to play both than there are that actually like do. It's not going to be that common that you're actually playing both.
That's fair.
I think we should continue to move because we have so many of these left to go through. The next card that we have up on the docket is Rune Prison. So we've been talking about a lot of different units. This is going to be a spell. This is a 2 energy, 1 power action speed. So on your turn or in showdowns, stun a unit. Stun just means that it won't deal combat damage this turn. This is Leona finally getting some more stun support. For me, immediately, Leona is one of the decks I have played the most and tested with the most. I really enjoy the deck. I actually think it's incredibly strong. I think this is immediately going to go in the list. The cost is not irrelevant. I think 2 energy and a power is quite tough, but specifically in Leona, where you get the payoff of an additional buff alongside the stun, it's very good. And then I also think that stun as a keyword in general is very powerful. It should not be underestimated whatsoever. It's getting just the one-sided damage coming out is very good.
Yeah, I think stun is one of those things where when you're thinking about how to gauge the power level or judge how good a stun effect is, I think you have to think about both floor and ceiling, right? So stunning a recruit token, not great. Certainly not cost effective, but stunning, a Volibear or something that's huge is going to be incredibly impactful. So stun is very good when your opponent is playing big, tall things and you're just trying to remove them from the equation to kind of get them off the board without suffering many losses. And I think that when you look at that in a vacuum, it seems really good. It scales well into the late game. So it's one of those things where even if you draw this late, it's not terrible. But then when you pair it with Leona or with anything else that's going to get those inherent benefits from stun, suddenly this goes from a situational card to potentially really powerful. And I do think it will end up being a staple in Leona. I think that when we get details about limited, this could also be a very powerful limited card as well.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Now remind me, if the combat ends up not being resolved because something like a stunned unit would be left alive.
Yeah. Attackers go home.
Attackers go home. So this is actually inherently a more defensively oriented card, though obviously can still be used on attack.
Yes. Yep.
So
it's slightly better on defense because of that.
I mean, it's going to be the thing that you have to think of at all times when you're playing against green and they have 2 resources and a green power to spend, right? Like, you're going to plan your attacks around, okay, if they have Rune Prison, do I still get through here or do I just get completely blown out at not that big of a cost? I do think, obviously, in the Leona deck, it's a staple. I think overall, though, I think it's going to be a little bit, I don't think that this just goes in every single green deck. I think you need to be, you're going to want to be slightly more defensive based, and you're going to obviously need to be quite combat oriented because like stunning a unit doesn't stop it from conquering, right? Like if someone if they just attack undefended, you can't stun the unit and send it home, right? It would still get that battlefield. Okay, so
it's still conquer. I think the big thing that you look at with these, the decks are 40 cards, right? So you have to be pretty choosy when it comes to which spells you're going to end up bringing in alongside your units. Leona, this is obvious. This is probably going into most, if not all, Leona decks. We'll see about the numbers. Maybe it's not a 3 of, maybe it's less. I currently think it's a 3 of, but we'll see. But when you're looking at that 2 energy cost, 1 power, and you look at the other side and they're playing green, you have to think, is it Rune Prison? Am I getting stunned? Is it Defy? Am I getting counterspelled when I try and play something? So do I have to worry about +3 on the unit I'm attacking? I think there's a few more in green, but also you have to think about the other color that the the legend you're playing against is as well. But green has quite a few combat tricks at this cost, but there's so many different ways that you can get blown out by green playing at just 2 energy. And this is just another thing that gets added to the arsenal.
Yep. Okay, let's continue on here into another champion we got this time. It is Fiora. Not quite the Fiora from lore, but still very powerful. It is a 4 resource, 4 might. Notably, did not mention a power. It says, while I'm mighty, which of course means that she has 5 or more might, I have deflect, ganking, and shield. Ganking means that she can go from one battlefield to another, and shield gets +1 while defending. What do you think, Cass?
What am I thinking on Fiora? I think immediately, anytime you see a card that doesn't have a power cost, it starts to become a bit appealing, right? Because you are getting to play very strong tempo. You're not losing any of your resources, can continue to ramp up. And it's 4 for 4 with an additional effect. I think that the 4 cost slot gets contested a lot by very strong champions and very strong cards. In the context of Leona, as that's a deck that I've been playing quite a bit, you are playing Leona, which is 4 energy, 1 power. You are playing Sona, which is 4 energy, 1 power. And so you already are kind of having these things contesting the slot. However, that deck also has an easy time making Fiora mighty. You can get 1 buff onto Fiora, and now she is mighty and has these very strong keywords. I think in a vacuum, Fiora is very strong. I've struggled to figure out how I want to slot her into decks, but I do feel like just as a power level, Fiora is a strong unit, is quite good.
I firmly believe Fiora is going to be situational because the decks that want to utilize her will have to put some effort into it. She's not something you can blindly staple in, but also even less so than, say, like Nocturne that we talked about earlier. You don't, in my opinion, you don't build around Fiora either. You just want to include her when the rest of your deck would do something with her naturally. So Leona seems like a potential fit. The other ones that, jumped out to me were potentially Set. Set is the cool ability of, if something would die, you can spend its buff and then it essentially goes home. It doesn't get defeated. And so if you're running a deck with Set where you can give out a bunch of buffs because you're planning on spending them to come back, well, 1 buff is all it takes to get Fiora online. And then if she would go away, she comes back to the base and then goes back out. So you're having to deal with this powerhouse over and over again with 3 keywords. Like, that sounds like a nightmare. So I do think that we'll likely see some version of Set that runs her. But again, ultimately to support her, I think you're going to need to have that be part of just your natural game plan. So I think she's situational.
I actually feel like I hard agree with your take. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yep. I was waiting for someone to bring up Set because that feels like the joke with Fiora is like, give her 1 buff and she's turned on, right? Like that's the most efficient way to do it. We're going to have to wait and see what our tools are for Set and for the other legends to give out those buffs. Is it easy? Is it in addition to other effects that we want to play anyway to just get the buff on Fiora, and then all of a sudden you have this very efficient, does something with buffs? I don't know, but I'm just guessing based on the fact that she's Demacian and like it's just give her 1 might, she comes online. Not having a power cost, only needing 1 buff to be turned on is really good. 4 energy is a lot in other games. It's obviously less here kind of in Riftbound because we get 2 runes a turn, but you still don't want to have your deck be nothing but 4 drops, right? Like the decks, it's going to be very selective for the 4 drops you want to actually run. And she is good, but I'm wondering, I'm not thinking that she's going to be game breaking. So
yeah, I'm going to take that as a quick tangent here, unrelated to Fiora or really any of the cards that we talked about so far. From my experience playing more of the game, in our first few episodes, I think we have severely underrated high cost cards in this game. Charmer was onto something a little bit with, hey, the resource curve. We didn't really know it yet. And it's closer to something like One Piece, right? Where you're getting the 2 resources every turn. And like 9 drops in One Piece are just crazy, right? They're insanely good. And I think we're a little bit closer to that in Riftbound, where some of the big cost bombs are a lot better than we initially would like think they are, because getting to those rune amounts is not as hard if your deck is constructed in a way that doesn't spend a lot of power early game and then spends the power in the late game. That's just my PSA for all the viewers out there. Is actually some of the big stuff is actually quite good. It's a lot better than you would think.
Well, speaking of big stuff and speaking of buffs and speaking of set, we've got Udyr, another champion here. It is Udyr, 6 energy, 1 body power for a 6 might champion who says, spend my buff and choose one you've not chosen this turn. You can either deal 2 damage to a unit at a battlefield, stun a unit at a battlefield, ready me, or give me ganking this turn. The old school MTG players are seeing the Morphling in play. We've got it. Charmer, what do you think about Udyr?
I really like Udyr because of his flexibility. I was kind of waiting for what the payoff was going to be with Lee Sin, if I'm being honest, because Lee Sin being able to give out a buff, I felt like we needed more things that spend buffs to do interesting things. And it turns out Udyr does 4 interesting things all on one card, and they're all pretty relevant. So I think that I expect Udyr to see some play. I don't know if it'll be a guaranteed 3 of, but when I see this level of flexibility and there are, you know, leaders like Lee Sin where you can just give them out willy-nilly, you don't have to wait for a card. I could see a situation where Udyr is potentially also played in something like Set, but because Set wants you to spend the buff to save the unit and Udyr wants to spend the buff to do his thing, it's a bit, you know, counterintuitive. But I think if you're playing Lee Sin, I would take a very long, hard look at Udyr for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think Udyr looking pretty good overall. Something that I'm really interested in, but I feel like I haven't seen enough of the buff support to be fully excited about him outside of Lee Sin. So I think Lee Sin is, right now, that's where you want to play Udyr. And I'm curious if he can fit into a Set archetype as well, or any of the other body places. Like I don't really see this as a Volibear pickup, but the cost curve makes sense. I just don't see buffs really working out. And then I don't see it as a misfortune card either. But it does seem insanely good.
Yep. Again, it's going to be asterisk until we see the whole set. What is the buff support? We've seen some cards, but is that going to be enough? Is there enough support? I think you need to be able to, I mean, you not only need to be able to give Udyr a buff every turn, you really need to be able to give him like 2 a turn to make me really excited about playing him. Like, and honestly, it may even be more than that, because like if you ready him, if you conquer ready, you then need to give ganking. So yeah, I don't know. It's really going to depend on the support. If that deck exists, if there is the support to give Udyr multiple buffs a turn reliably, and then also have resources to do other things, feels like a very pivotal piece of that deck. You know, situational in the sense that he's definitely not going to go in every body deck. He's not, like, if you don't have buffs, he's just a like not quite on rate unit. So excited for him, but with an asterisk so far. Up next is a card that I don't have an asterisk for. I think what it does is quite evident on the card. We've got Kog'Maw Caustic. He is a 3 cost, 1 chaos power unit champion with 1 might. Says death knell, deal 4 units, or to deal 4 to all units at my battlefield when I die. You get the effect. Yeah, Kog'Maw goes kaboom when he dies. Yep. Cass, have you thought about Kog'Maw at all?
Flavor W for sure. This is just Kog'Maw passive from League of Legends, right?
Yep.
I think overall the game has done a pretty good job of having a lot of these like flavor wins. The biggest thing that I look at Kog'Maw initially, this is another card I haven't gotten any playtime with, but I just look at this as, okay, Yasuo got a 5 energy AoE removal spell. This is not a unit. It's an AoE removal spell for Yasuo. You play it on the board, and then you just use the Yasuo ability to move it into where you want to go. You can also, of course, just kind of like stick Kog'Maw on your base and just be like, all right, whenever you want to take a base with too many units, here comes Cog.
Come and get
That's what's going to happen. Especially because we've talked about in the past how there's not that much removal at your base. A lot of removal is focused on battlefield. So if your Kog'Maw is sitting at base, you can kind of just leave it there, safe, waiting to go in when you need it, which is threatening. I see this card as being definitely good in Yasuo because I think 5 energy deal 4 to all units at a battlefield, or 5 energy, 1 power. I think that's good enough to see play situationally, definitely in the sideboard. I think I'd 100% put it in my sideboard. And, maybe it can be used in other Chaos decks a little bit more as just sitting it on your bench and waiting for an opportune time to send the Kog'Maw in. This is a great counter to Blue Ahri, for example. That is a card that,
True.
Is really difficult to deal with. And if you just send a Kog'Maw in, his might doesn't matter. It's all about, he just goes in and blows up. So it's neat. I like the card. I think Kog'Maw is pretty strong, but it is a situational pick. A really great sideboard piece for Chaos.
You hit the hit the nail on the head. My brain was going faster than my mouth for a moment there. This is, I think, most likely a sideboard card unless we get some additional support for it in the future. Where I like it as a sideboard card would be, as you said, against Ahri or potentially against Victor lists where folks might have a ton of recruit tokens, for example. You're going to want a way to clean those up. What really jumps out to me right now, though, about this is removal disguised as a body, but it still gets all of those interactions that units do as well. So cards like a cemetery attendant, the cutest little dog in print so far. It's, if you're not familiar, that is a 3 energy. I think it's also 1 power, 3 might unit, but when you play it, you return a unit from your discard pile to your hand. So being able to recur Kog'Maw, because he's a unit, not a spell, is beneficial. And in the future, if we get more kind of reanimator effects, Kog'Maw, I happen to notice, just has 1 power. A lot of times reanimator effects, in order to scale how powerful they are, they limit them to power. It might be, reanimate something with 3 power or less. Well, it turns out Kog'Maw's future-proofed. So for me, Kog'Maw is situational, but could become a staple for a lot of decks in the future if we get more discard pile or reanimation support.
Yeah, I think Kog'Maw is a pretty straightforward, staple sideboard card. It really is not good against the Volibear type decks because the way that damage happens, you can't just send Kog'Maw in to do a chunk of damage and then send your other units in afterwards because the damage will heal. So if you don't kill with Kog'Maw, it's not good. And if you send your other units in with Kog'Maw, boy, does he kill them. So it's kind of, you need to be playing against the right deck, the Victor deck that has a bunch of recruit tokens or just a swarmy deck, maybe against Jinx or other aggressive decks. Kog'Maw is going to shine, but against some decks, it's just stone bad. So I think that's definition of a situational sideboard card. If you're coming from Magic the Gathering, the Pyroclasm type effects, it's really good when it's good, and it sits in your sideboard when it's not. So that's a perfectly fine place for a card to be, and that's where Kog'Maw is in my mind. Let's move on here to a card I'm quite excited about. This is called Consult the Past. It is a 4 energy spell. It's got hidden, it's got reaction, and it just says draw 2 cards. I'm in. I mean, this is not quite Ancestral Recall. It's, if we're calling the hidden cost half of resource, half a mana, half an energy, whatever you want to call it, it's half a mana, draw 2 cards. I'm in. That's better than Ancestral Recall because it would be 1 whole mana to draw 4. I'm in. Give me Consult the Past.
See, draw a card. I like it. I like drawing cards. So I feel like this will make it into most decks. I've talked extensively on this podcast about how I think that card draw is very good in Riftbound as of right now, and how important card advantage is. This will generate you some card advantage because you're trading in 1 card for 2 cards. So if my math is correct, that's +1 card compared to what you had before. So it is better than the 1 card.
I really like this card. For obvious reasons. Drawing equals good. Drawing's fun. Even if it's not good, drawing's fun. Who doesn't like to draw more cards? I will say, I think that the decks that want to run the Mind Victor that we saw earlier also benefit from this, because whether you're paying the full 4, not that you want to, but even if you do, it's at reaction speed. It's again something you can do on their turn and also get that additional benefit. Whether you're hiding it, there's benefits there as well. I will, however, say, as much as I like this card, and I thought this was a Windmill Slam auto include, the more I think about Teemo, there's a chance this might not make the cut unless Teemo needs a critical mass of cards with hidden on it. And my reasoning is because you, I think, are always going to want your hidden slots to be things that impact combat. in Teemo, because most of your other stuff is underpowered. And further, if you're also playing Nocturne, this draws cards instead of reveals them. So you will potentially do the bad thing, which is draw Nocturne.
True.
So there is a deck where I could see this not being played, but most mine decks are going to want to be running this. It's just really, really good as a baseline.
So you came up with the biggest weakness of this card, which is essentially the hidden keyword on it, which, while it is a strength as far as the cost is concerned, it's also a major weakness, because if you are a deck that actually cares about hidden, suddenly you now have this thing that you can only hide one card at a battlefield. And do you want that to be Consult the Past? Probably not. Very frequently, do you want that to be Consult the Past? You really want to hide it on a battlefield and immediately on the next turn, like on your opponent's turn, just kind of play it.
Those are the new cards for this week. Let's go into our mailbag before we round out the show today. Again, thank you everyone who is watching on YouTube. If you want to get your question potentially answered on the podcast, head over to our YouTube channel and leave a comment. Do the thing. Leave a comment, and we will potentially talk about it. Let's start off with KK Jazz asking, how is everyone playing this already? Gas, it's TTS, right? That's the place.
Yeah, I mean, I answered this one in the comments, but also I just think as a PSA to anyone watching this podcast who maybe has the same question or hasn't had a chance to play, there's a very good tabletop simulator mod for it that was made by Willow CCG. There's like a Riftbound community server that they run as well, and people do play in that server. I usually just play with friends and people I test with in other card games right now, but there is like a community server there that you can even find games even if you don't have anyone to necessarily play with. And all you have to do is look up in the workshop of Tabletop Simulator for Riftbound, and it should pop right up for you. I know also Pixelborn is another one, but they are not updated, whereas for the TTS mod, you can get all of the cards as they are coming out. They're being pretty much updated almost immediately. So
yeah, Pixelborn has has basically like the first week of reveals cards, and they're not putting other ones in until they're all revealed. So
also you can print and or just write the text of any card on a piece of paper and then put it in a deck sleeve and shuffle and play.
That is true.
Proxies are always a great way to play right now if you've got like a local community or friends locally that you want to play with. I know I'll be proxying to try and play a few games with some buddies. I'm headed off to Pro Tour Singapore for Flesh and Blood, and I'm going to try and play some Riftbound with some of my teammates there.
Speaking of proxy games, we go to Max Tepera Gaming. Let's go. My comment made the video. Yes, you can get your comments on the video if you leave comments on the YouTube channel. But speaking of that, of Max, they had a game with friend of the show Cosmic plays on their YouTube channel. You should check them out. They played Darius versus Lee Sin. It was a webcam game using proxies like we just talked about. I watched that match. I won't spoil the result, but it was a good one to watch, and Cosmic makes really good high quality stuff and voiceovers the match. So that's a good one to check out for sure. Let's move on to
Max as well. Max as well has been making a lot of Riftbound content over on his channel, and he's got a lot of gameplay stuff as well. I'm sure we're gonna get Max on to come challenge us and play against us on the channel soon enough. This is a call out right now, Max. We'll do a gameplay video together at some point soon, coming future. I don't know. My DMs are open.
The gauntlet has been thrown.
We'll play some games.
Hey, Matt Cosmore, aka Cosmic, if you're listening, let's get together, because he's local to me. He's the one who got
y'all should play in person.
We're adorable little friends, and I will play you in person, so we should make that happen, actually.
All right, 2 gauntlets have been thrown down. Let's make this happen. And let's throw one down here as we call out Mo once again. Another comment from Mr. Emotional. 10 out of 10 podcast. I do think Volibear is the most underrated deck in the game for sure. Pretty sure he actually beats every deck that isn't Jinx or Victor and Darius. And the Darius matchup is close to 50-50. Volibear just straight up removes green as a color and is also being built wrong and played horribly. Very happy to give away 3 to 4 points before I actually start to interact with battlefields. I just want to point out that Mo is saying in this one comment that he plays a lot of Volibear, and also that Volibear is being built poorly and played poorly. I just want to point that out. I think he's exposing himself here.
Mo will love to speak in a lot of hyperbole. I've been talking to him a lot about Volibear throughout this last week. I think he's correct in his statements that it is the most underrated deck in the game. I think we severely underrate it. That goes back to my PSA about high cost stuff being better than we expected. I was finding that in decks that are not Volibear, I was like, wow, this like 8-drop is way better than I ever thought it was going to be. But that just rings true for Volibear. The trial deck, I think, unfortunately, is where the Riftbound team missed with Volibear. I think the rest of the decks felt pretty good to play. The Voli deck had some issues. I think when you start to construct it with even this heavily lacking card pool that we have with a lot of stuff missing, the deck can shore up some of its flaws. And it's really hard to deal with the massive units that Volibear is putting on before you have your own full rune base built up, because he ramps there pretty quickly. So I think it's a better deck than people think. I agree with Mo. I don't think it removes green as a color. We didn't get to play games this week, but over the weekend, probably into next week, I'm going to try and play into Mo's Volibear and prove this a little bit wrong. But if I get smashed, next podcast, I will admit it, that Mo is the GOAT of Volibear and I got destroyed or something like that. I don't know. I'll think of something.
And it's so weird how language works, because you all read that and read one thing and I read something else. I read this as 10 out of 10 podcast because Charmer is right for hyping Volibear the past.
Well, the whole thing was that Mo had this huge discussion on social media website with someone about going back and forth about Volibear. I'm like, you need to watch the podcast, because Charmer's out here throwing, what did I say? I think I said like time grenades or something. Like he just from the future lobbed the bomb and nailed it. And then we get the 10 out of 10 podcast comment. So yeah, I think you're right, Charmer. Okay. Couple more questions here before we wrap up the show. We've got another one here from Riftbound Dex, who says, is Set currently playable when you don't draw Arena Bar, or do we need more buff cards to drop before he's consistent enough? We definitely touched on this a lot during the show, but I think it's really, as a general rule, it's really hard to evaluate the power of any individual card or deck without seeing all the cards. That just goes without saying. Now, these shows and episodes are fun to do because the cards are new and we're excited about them. So that's why we do them. That's why everyone who's doing any of these shows is doing them, because it's fun to do, build up excitement. But we really don't know until A, all the cards are revealed, B, the first round of decks get built, C, the second round of decks get built to beat the first round of decks, D, actual tournaments start where people are trying to win happen, which is months, if not, multiple months down the road. We won't know, right? But I think as a design point, the designers of Riftbound want all of the legends to be at least somewhat playable. So I don't think that Set as a legend was designed to only function with Arena Bar. I think that can't be the case, or else they failed horribly, and I don't think that they did in the first set that they made.
I mean, I still think Set is incredibly powerful when I read his zero text. I think he's going to be good on release. I think Body is missing a lot of stuff right now. I do know some people are currently playing Set and the deck looks good. It looks fine. And that's mostly, you mostly have to play around Arena Bar because that's the easiest engine to get buffs at this current juncture. But I would say that yes, he's still playable because the card pool's in order. In order is very, very strong in the first place. So you can just play around order. If you're just looking to play Set right now, as the card pool is as of June 27th, when we're recording this, he's playable. I mean, it doesn't really matter though, because we're waiting for all the cards to come out. It's just whatever you're going to have fun playing. When you proxy or play on TTS, you should just play whatever and see how it goes for yourself.
All right. Last question of the episode. Again, thanks everyone who sent in their comments on the YouTube channel. So if you're listening to this on YouTube right now, leave a comment and we'll potentially talk about it on the next episode. We got one from the Techlo Foundry. It says, invert also seems good in very slower decks, going up on cards while putting your opponent down. It feels like an auto include in Jinx since you dig one card extra each turn after you're online. So finding a copy of it in the end game feels easy. Feels similar to playing Treasure Cruise / Dig Through Time in Delver or Burn, which is basically an expensive spell that gets cost reduced over the course of time by removing cards from your graveyard. I mean, we talked about this a bit on the show. This is the 3 energy Chaos card.
Chaos.
One power
Chaos. Yep.
Chaos card that says each player discards their hand and draws 4 cards. Right? That's what is it? Discard or recycle?
That's the card.
Yep. So if you're playing an aggressive deck, you play out your whole hand and you top deck this. Oh, all of a sudden I get to draw a fresh new hand when I had nothing. If your opponent's playing a control deck, they had 5, 6, 7 cards in their hand. They're now getting rid of those and going back up to only 4. So that's definitely one of the best use cases for the card. But as we talked in the episode, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, I mean, this is, Teklo Foundry is a very strong Flesh and Blood player. He's a content creator for Flesh and Blood as well. And so it's cool to see that he's jumping into Riftbound as well. I would talk to him a little bit in the comment section there. It seemed like we both kind of agreed that with Jinx, it does feel great as like a 1 or 2 of, but it is part of this, what he's saying is you're digging through your deck so much, you'll likely find it at some point. You don't want too many of them because in aggro mirrors, it's actively quite bad. However, against any slower deck, you definitely want 1 and maybe you want 2. So kind of what I was liking is maybe 1 main deck, 1 sideboard, but that remains to be seen as the rest of the card pool comes out. Though playing it felt very strong. I had one game in particular. I was playing against, I believe it was Majid Bey playing Kaisa. I was teaching him the game and he just like had a full grip of like 6 cards. I was playing everything out and I knew like he's been holding up this one spell the entire time that was going to blow me out in the turn. I just invert and say, well, good luck drawing the spell again. And see if you can find it to actually, blow me out on this attack. He didn't find it. I'm able to win the game. So it has some really cool play into those controlling decks that are trying to beat you in that way. So
that is going to be the episode. That's our episode for this week. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you, everyone who left a comment on our YouTube videos. Again, if you're listening to this right now and you haven't already in the 5 previous times I've mentioned it, you can get your winning point of life by leaving a comment on this video and getting your comment in our next mailbag. I do want to point out one thing before we go here, that we're going to be putting out a beginner how to play guide for Riftbound on the channel here shortly. It's made mostly for brand new players, potentially that are at an LGS and don't know how to play, or that you're looking to bring into the game. It's going to be a nice, easy resource for that. There are some out there that are quite lengthy and go into the weeds of it, and those are great. We want something that's a nice, easy beginner guide to get people maybe that you've met at your local game store or that you want to get in from other games to get in and start playing as soon as possible. So that is our episode for the day. Cass, any last words before we go?
I don't know. Game's fun. I need to get back in the mines testing. I need to join the Forge workers. Get in the Forge. Get ready to go. All right.
Our last words.
Charmer also yearns for the mines.
There we go. And from the minds and hearts of the viewers, we're going to say goodbye to this one. This was the winning point. I've been Blevins. That's been Casanova. That's been Charmer. And we'll see you on the next one next week.
Peace.